Hello and welcome to episode 51 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I have a very special one for you today, especially to me and my guest share something very, very important in common, apart from having Hirschsprung's disease, obviously. But I'm joined by actor and director and RADA alumni, Fred Gray. Welcome, Fred.
Hello. Very, very excited to be here. We were talking... Yes, before we came on, that I've never met anyone aside from my family who's got Hirschsprung's. It's a hugely exciting day for me. So
it's you're in exactly the same position as I was in a year ago, having met nobody else with Hirschsprung's. I thought, well, I'll start a podcast about it.
Makes me want to start a podcast. I'm not going to lie to you, Tom. I feel like I want to rival you and meet as many Hirschsprung's survivors as possible. That would be, fun, but I won't do that. It's your thing.
You can't call it Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. That's the only rule. It's trademarked.
Part two.
But no, it is an enormous pleasure to have you on, because as we mentioned, and for anybody that has listened to your wife Jamie's episode, which has gone out a few weeks ago, they will know that we share something very, very important in common apart from having Hirschsprung's disease. But we'll leave that a little bit later on. Would you like to start with exactly, build a little suspense, build a little drama? You'll know that being an actor, got to build drama.
What you're doing, tricks of the trade. I really enjoyed it. Okay, carry
on. So let's start with your story. Because you have Total Colonic Hirschsprung's, diagnosed from birth, but you also have a family connection with Hirschsprung's. Your dad has Hirschsprung's as well. Would you like to talk a little bit about sort of diagnosis?
Absolutely. I think one thing that will become clear over the next 45 minutes is that I actually don't know a lot. Like medically, I don't really know, but like I've got stuff missing inside. I don't really know what's missing. Like I don't really know. In fact, when I was 8, I found out in a consultation, like a checkup at Great Ormond Street. Me and my mother found out that I had one kidney. I hadn't found out until I was 8, and I remember my mum being like furious that she didn't know that, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I've got one kidney." So I've got like things missing, and I don't really know. So there are holes. There are holes in my knowledge. But I know that my dad has Hirschsprung's, and obviously I have Hirschsprung's, and my son now has Hirschsprung's. So there's a sort of a 3-line generational connection. And when I was in Great Ormond Street and explained this, they said that's incredibly rare. It's not supposed to be hereditary. Like even now I'm like, is that the right word? So yeah, it's not supposed to pass down like that. So they were incredibly fascinated by that. My dad's, as far as I understand it, his Hirschsprung's wasn't as severe as mine. Maybe a short section, but obviously the medical research into it was less. So they didn't know as much about it. And obviously before my dad's generation, people would just die from it. So my dad had it, and that was incredibly useful for me growing up, and hopefully that will be the same for Dylan, my son, who has it, in a way that when you have a parent who has lived experience of it, it just frames everything for you. So I never felt, I felt looked after and cared for, but I never felt like I was disabled, if that's I never felt that way, that I would give myself that label. Not that there's anything obviously of course wrong with being, in fact since Dylan I've started using disabled toilets because I'm like I need this, and why have I never it's taken me 30 odd years to do that. It's it's silly, but I felt like it was a power. I felt like I'd survived something, and there was a sort of a resilience and a thing that I sort of displayed at a really young age. I was in Great Ormond Street for 2 years, basically. I had multiple operations, I messaged my dad before the podcast. I said, how many operations I had? And he said 3. Now, I thought it was more than that. But 3 very serious operations. And he said that there was one where they offered me an emergency christening. There was like a 20% chance of survival. And it didn't look good. And the reason why there was only 3 is because I was constantly unwell. Like I was constantly not well enough to be operated on. So there was infections and there was like all sorts going on. I was called Spike in hospital. That was my nickname. My hair just spiked up. And yeah, so 2 years, and then obviously went back in. So when I left, I would then have to go back every 2 weeks, then every month, and every 2 months, and every 3 months, and eventually discharged when I was 16. And then obviously lived my life. It's like I remember having a really normal childhood. I remember that my bottom was often sore from the sea, or staying in wet swimming trunks was no good. I think from the ages of between 4 and 6, again, this is just a guess, I could only eat boiled chicken and boiled potatoes for I think it was a year. That I could only have those 2 things, because anything my body could digest. And apparently I was well up for it every time. My mum and dad told me.
You get bored.
At dinner time, I was just like, more. And they were like, what is wrong? They would like jazz it up. They'd try and do different things with those 2 things. And every now and again, I might get a bit of gravy or whatever. But it was boiled chicken and boiled potatoes. And I still love both those things. You think by now I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to move on to other things. But I absolutely love chicken and potatoes. Love it. So like little things like that. I remember being very embarrassed about my body growing up as a teenager. I remember like going swimming or going on family with holiday with my family. I would have my arms crossed across my stomach because I've got a big scar across there. I used to say it was from a shark attack, and just make things up. But just constantly like really embarrassed by that, and that is something that I wish I didn't waste time on, because it's just. Your scars are souvenirs you never lose. And I just think that was a souvenir of the fact that I went through some stuff. Obviously unaware of it at the time. I don't remember anything from hospital. And this is also the thing with moving on to Dylan a little bit. It's that when we were in hospital, I don't want to go over the same ground that Jamie did when she was on. I thought it was an incredible, I found it really moving listening to it, obviously. Is that Jamie would worry about Dylan, obviously growing up with Hirschsprung, especially early days, before he's just incredible right now. In terms of when he got it, I thought, okay, so I was in for 2 years. Maybe it's a bit better now. So maybe we're looking at like a year and a half. He'll be in hospital, and then we'll sort of do the thing, chicken potatoes. We'll go through the motions, and I'll know what that is, and we'll be fine. And it wasn't like that at all. He was in for maybe 4 or 5 months in total, and he was in there for like a month, 5 weeks. Then he came out and had to go back. Again, Jamie explained all this in the other podcast, but it was nowhere near the 2 years. It was nowhere near, and also his scar is nothing like mine. But it's also in the event that it was going to be exactly the same, in the same way my parents did for me. It's all about how you frame these things, and I never felt, as I said, I never felt different. I never felt like I had something to be obviously the teenage thing takes over. Yeah. And that's the thing. But I want, for a very early age, we're getting Dylan to celebrate this thing. And I remember when he started to put thoughts together. There was one time where he was in the shower with me. So he would just sort of stand in front of me as I was showering. And when he was starting to say some thoughts like, "Daddy, I'm hungry," or "Can I have some dinner?" And out of absolutely nowhere, he just said, "Daddy," and I was like, "Yes." He said, "I love my scar," and I was like, "Oh my God, and this is from he was maybe 1.5, 2 at the time, and I was like, it just absolutely blew my mind that was one of the first thoughts that he was able to put together, and that has seen him through. It's just that he's got such a wonderfully positive attitude and outlook. And also his scar is tiny compared to mine. I remember Jamie telling you the story about Mr Copy. I asked if it's going to look like this, and I lifted up my top, and he was like, "Absolutely."
Not anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Just this little tiny thing above the pant line, below the pant line, which was important and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, the 3-generational thing was mad, and also the what was really strange and hard about the whole experience was obviously me and Jamie were in it together, as we always are. But my experience of it was being home. It was in Great Ormond Street. I knew exactly what the beeping and the wires and the tubes and the operations and all of it was kind of second nature. And it was obviously my son, my firstborn son, which is obviously this whole new world that you enter into. But all of that stuff was just sort of second nature. Whereas obviously for Jamie, it was incredible. What is all this? What is this world? But for me, I was kind of experiencing on a lesser degree, because I don't think Dylan's was ever as serious as it was for me when I had those emergency operations. It was never a situation where Dylan had a 20% chance to survive or anything like that. But it's still incredibly scary. Is that I was experiencing on a lesser level what my parents did with me, and that's that. When I started to put that together, it was like it absolutely blew my mind that I was having this experience. And my mum and dad were at the phone, the end of the phone at the end of each day. And actually, my when we left after 4 weeks, my mum and dad came and visited him, and met him. And then a week after that, my mum died, just out of nowhere. It took us all by surprise. And I like to think that was my mum. My mum was always going to die, but that she was waiting until Dylan, her grandson, was at home safe and well. I mean, he wasn't well yet, but safe with us. And then she could go. I firmly believe that. But to have that experience, that sort of circle of life thing, was, and it made me appreciate what they did for me even more, about like my mum and dad, in terms of what it does to you. And and obviously my dad had the advantage that I had, which is that he had experienced it and he was able to feed that in, and et cetera, et cetera. But for Jamie, it was horrible. It was, I mean, obviously it was horrible for both of us.
Yeah.
And Jamie already talked about her experience of it. Yeah, but to have the experience that my parents had was something I can't really put into words about the sense of gratitude it gives you for what your parents give you.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly important. And I doing this podcast, I think, has made me really appreciate what my parents did for me too. And I know we were talking a little bit off camera as well about how much we knew about Hirschsprungs, sort of, or certainly how much I knew about Hirschsprungs before starting this podcast, and it was, now I think about it, next to nothing. And not knowing a great deal, and it's really given me a massive appreciation as to what all parents have gone through. I mean, I'd speak to all manner of people on this show, and a lot of people are parents of children who have Hirschsprungs, some of which have Hirschsprungs themselves, like you, and it just gives me a massive appreciation of what my parents did for me, and how worried they must have been as well at the time. And I think that's important.
And also the sort of community that you get in Great Ormond Street, or hospitals in general, this sort of life-affirming, like the awareness of mortality thing that binds people. And there's just kindness. There's just so much kindness, and it's the kindness that breaks me, actually. The sort of the trauma and the emergencies, the operations and the beeping, the blood and the thing, like all of that's kind of like you go into sort of survival mode and you're on top of it. When someone cuts through that and looks at you and says, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Okay, don't stop that. Do you need to stop?" And you get that so much at the vending machines, going down and getting some tomato soup from the vending machines at 1 a.m. or whatever. And you meet another parent that's there, and you talk about your experience. And I've got Hirschsprung. Your son's got Hirschsprungs, but their son has a new, like, something neurological, or like, yeah. It's it just blows my mind when I walk into that building. I feel just sort of like there's just a hug there, because there's so much stuff going on. It just strips away all the nonsense, and then you step out into the street and it's people shouting at cyclists and like spitting or being rude or like just being lost in their phone, or just there's no sort of like humanity. I don't know. I don't want to get on with that.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's just something that binds when you're in that sort of situation. That nothing really matters. Just nothing matters. It's just like, and also the first son thing, the first child thing. Obviously, him being sick. I've never had a child that hasn't been sick, and I don't know if I will again or we will again. But how much your love is fast tracked by your child being unwell is insane, and it's like, obviously it's genetic and DNA and thick, but it's like, okay, he needs to be better. Like, the person you've never met before then becomes the center of everything. Like nothing else matters. In a second, it's just like wow, and then it's something I can't explain, and I'm sure it's that way for any parent whose child is also healthy. Love just immediately. But I've never experienced that. All I can experience is what it felt like to be told, because Jamie obviously it was during COVID, she was by herself, and I remember getting that call in the morning saying, "You need to come in. He's been transferred. He's not pooing. He's been transferred to NICU." And I remember driving in the car with Jamie's mum, Kate. It's been amazing through all of this, and just again going through that 2 years and trying to just sort of process that immediately, and then walking in and seeing him in that little incubator with all the stuff, like this helpless 1 day old, 2 day old little thing, and you're like, okay, I need to do everything. I need to do everything to protect, to make him better, and now it's like he's never had it. He's potty trained. It's just insane, and he can eat anything. My chicken and potato thing, nowhere near it. Just nowhere near it. He eats everything. And you go to nurseries, like he finished all his dinner and he finished someone else's today as well. And that's the same way with me as well. Yeah, always.
That is brilliant, and I take that point as well, because having spoken to people in the field of Hirschsprungs, I never give medical advice on here, because I wouldn't know what to do, what to say. But a lot of people that I've spoken to within the medical field, and some that I've had on this podcast, have said that there are a lot of advancements being made within Hirschsprungs, and one of them being the scars. I've spoken to people who are around my age, within sort of maybe 10 years or so either way, and they do have that big, what I call it, a train track, effectively. So it has sort of a scar right across the middle, and then sort of lines going vertically. So a big horizontal line, and lines going vertically down. I think there's about 10 on there. Looks exactly like a train track. But I spoke to somebody the other day saying, no, that we don't have things that look like that anymore. We have sort of very little scars that you can't see a huge amount of, and things like that. And so hopefully in time, there'll always be a scar of some kind, but maybe in time they'll be sort of really, really tiny that you can't quite see it anymore.
Well, but I don't know. I might be being too sort of romantic about this. Definitely the wrong word. But like, for me, I don't know what's wrong with it.
Yeah, very true.
I remember actually when I was at drama school, RADA, we were doing a film class, and I someone asked, why do you have to put your hands backwards and forward when you do for adverts and things? You have to show your hands, and they said, well, that's just to see if you've got any scars or any abnormalities on your hand. And I was like, Hirschsprung. I was like, what's wrong with scars? Like flying the flag. And they said, well, from a sort of advertising perspective, they don't want to be, the client, the consumer doesn't want to be looking at you're advertising a mobile phone, and they're looking at the scar as opposed to the product, then it's not landing as much as it. And I was like, okay, and you're sort of fighting against the system or human psychology or whatever, and you're like, that is such a shame that I want to move into a situation where people are like celebrating scars in the same way they represent stories in the same way tattoos do, and that like if the body is a sort of canvas, it's like, well, what's that? Oh, what's that? Oh, that's cool. What's this? Rather than like, let's do everything we can to hide this so that people don't see our, this is the thing. I want to now I want to talk about it loads. This is when I found out about your podcast, I was like, oh my God, I need to get on that. And to, like, because it's incredibly empowering. It's incredibly like to know that other people have had the same experience, but to have gone through it yourself and say, I got through that. I got through that, and I had 20% of chance of survival, and I made it. And obviously, I was just a baby.
Yeah,
probably very little to do with me. But I like to think that my outlook and sort of driving forward as a result of my experience of having Hirschsprungs is different from someone who hasn't had that experience. And I think personalities are built through driving through adversities, in my opinion. And I'm just saying I've got a wonderful personality. What I'm saying?
No, carry on. Keep going. It's good.
I think you go through something like that. You have to negotiate. You have to negotiate difficulty and get over problems and that teenage thing. It's like I remember I did an autobiographical performance module at Glasgow University, and my module was all about my body. I remember I had like I won't tell you the whole thing, it would take ages, but like I had like a scarf over my scar, and it was like I basically ended up just taking it off and giving this monologue about, I'm proud of this. That's a very shorthand version of what actually happened. I'm making it sound terrible, and it probably was terrible because I was like, being like, oh, I'm glad, what I'm saying. Autobiographical performances from students aren't necessarily the greatest things, but I've got this. But it was an incredibly empowering moment for me because I was able to stand in front of my friends and celebrate who I was. And celebrate what was on my body and what that represented in the way that I hadn't really done before, and that was great. And I suppose my overall point is I wish that we could move past the thing of scars being something that we need to hide or make smaller, or like let's talk about them and let's talk about why they matter and why you're here, like why you're actually here. This scar is because I'm still here.
Yeah,
I'm still
absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned a point there about, you might not know what's going on when you are a baby and you're having all of these, tubes and being surgically operated on, etc. But I fully believe that, and again, I might just be talking whatever, but I believe a great amount of resilience comes from that. I don't know whether it's the same for other Hirschsprung's people, but I have an incredibly high pain threshold, ridiculously high. But I believe that came from having so many surgeries as a baby. And I think it does, in a way, make you incredibly resilient. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually think that, generally speaking, and Jamie will attest to this, that my immune system seems to be stronger as well. I'm very rarely ill. Saying that, actually, about 2 months ago, I was hospitalized for dehydration because I got gastroenteritis, and because Dylan got it, and I was desperately trying to get him to drink Diurolite and try and get him better, and I succeeded. But Jamie was away with work at this time, just in case you thought she was just not involved in that.
They're doing that.
It's fine. And I got the same thing. Whatever Dylan had, I had it as well. Dylan made a recovery, and I got progressively worse. And it's the first time in about 15 years that I was hospitalized. Because obviously the main issue for me now is dehydration. That I have a letter from Great Ormond Street saying if this, which I actually don't have anywhere on hand, but says put this man on a drip. If he needs to, it could be fatal. And I got probably more dehydrated than I have ever been, because I thought I could, as I always have done. Because it's not like I haven't got dehydrated. I've always been able to hydrate myself. Whereas this time it just floored me, and I phoned 111 and I passed out on the phone, and it was just me and Dylan in the house, and he was incredible. Like he was incredible. The ambulance then came, and Dylan was just sort of there stroking my hand. I mean, he's 3, just stroking my hand. I'm like, we're going to take Daddy to hospital now. And he was like, no, you haven't finished checking him. So he had like all these things on me, and like he's just the most empathetic, and he was like, it's okay, Daddy, it's okay. I was like, why am I so, how is this, it's just amazing. So that was again quite a humbling experience, because I think as you grow up with Hirschsprungs, obviously your body gets stronger, you adapt, and you just get better. But an experience like that makes you realize actually things aren't, because the getting up in the night and going to the toilet, and needing to go to the toilet more during the day, and the consistency of your poo and things like whatever is fine. It's just part of your normal life, right? But the going into hospital and having that treatment that you've had, it's like, oh, this can floor you. This can still get you. This is still a thing. I used to sort of maybe put it in the same way I didn't use disabled toilets, is that I would always kind of maybe diminish the how serious it is, maybe. And so that made me sort of, I don't know. I just, again, awareness on mortality and stuff. I wasn't close to dying, I don't think. Or actually, saying I wasn't close to dying, but my kidney levels, again, speaking to my brother, were incredibly high. And obviously I've only got one kidney. So there was, when I went in, there was a potential for, if it got worse, didn't improve, it was on the road to dialysis and all that sort of stuff, which is dangerous. Yeah. And in the same way, I wasn't allowed to play rugby. Like, my parents didn't want me to play rugby at school and things like this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I think that's an important point you make about people who, maybe like us, who were at Great Ormond Street, were at a certain hospital till 16, and then you leave, and then it's kind of like, well, everything's fine now. Well, and people say things like, well, I had Hirschsprungs. So, well, right. you still have it. It's not, the ganglion cells in the intestine haven't grown back overnight just because you turned 17. It doesn't quite work like that.
Did you have a stoma?
I did. I had the Ace Malone stoma when I was 9, and then reversed at 23.
Wow. See, I didn't have a stoma. Like, I never had that growing up past being out of hospital.
No.
So you lived those 13 years going into, like, so you must have experienced the same level of embarrassment as a teenager. How was it?
Yeah, I mean, I know we were talking a little bit off air about tegaderms. I know I've mentioned tegaderms before, and about having the tegaderm over the stoma, but it was used to do the washouts. So you put the catheter through, and I think it was like once a week or something. You do 4 different solutions. Saline was one of them. I think there was another couple of other things as well. And do that once a week. But then over time, I had to do the washouts less and less, until at 15, we sort of trialed stopping them entirely. And thankfully, I haven't had to do another washout since the age of 15. But I partially attribute that to keeping very fit, because I've always been in the sports industry. So keeping fit, keeping healthy, I think was something that was really, really important. But then I had the reversal at 23, but I didn't know before then that you could have stoma reversals. So I never knew, leaving Great Ormond Street, nobody said. We sort of kept it just in case I needed it again. But I never knew you could have reversals until then. It started becoming a bit of a problem. It started leaking, and it was just, again, being sports coach that I am, and working in schools all the time, and it was leaking. It was just, it's not ideal. So then I did some research, spoke to a GP, said, can this thing actually be reversed? And they said, oh yeah, of course it can. I thought, oh right. I didn't know that. And so then I had it reversed at 23, and then touch wood, no more operations since 23, and I'm 32 now.
Wow. What does that feel? What did that feel like to have a obviously the stoma must have just felt part of you. I don't know if you remembered before 9.
That's the thing. At 9, I mean, I don't remember a great deal about it. It just it was just there, you know. And one day you don't have a stoma, and the next day you do have a stoma, and then you have to do all these, you know, washouts and things like that, which were not nice, you know. But it was better than an alternative, I guess. But then,
did it affect like friendships or relationships? Sorry, maybe that's too.
Yeah, go for, no, I don't think so. But I think I was self-conscious of it. I mean, obviously doing a lot of sport, PE lessons, playing football at the weekends, playing cricket at the weekends. You know, you're constantly in changing rooms, aren't you? So, you know, there will be people that went, "Oh, what's that?" You know, and obviously you can't explain it necessarily because it would take hours. So you kind of just say, "Oh, yeah, you know, I have a stomach condition," and generally they go, "Oh, okay," you know, and then you move on with life. Or some people, like you said with the shark attack. I have had some people. I do remember this going way back, probably about 20 years ago, with people who went, "Oh, were you attacked by a shark?" And it was a genuine question. It wasn't, you know, taking a mick. And sometimes I'd say yes, and sometimes I'd say no. It just depended whether I wanted to lie about it or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that body confidence thing is really important, and something that isn't necessarily talked about a huge amount. I think that's incredibly interesting. Just sort of with the scars as they are, and being proud of them, I think is definitely a great way to go, instead of, you know, like you said with the swimming, and like me as well, sort of almost trying to hide them from people. And I think that kind of that, and again, it's a personal thing, isn't it? You can't necessarily just say to somebody, "Be happy with your scars," because they might, you know, they might take quite a long time to sort of appreciate that, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
I suppose that's why the "Daddy, I love my scar" moment was so huge. It was just like it was just a pure thought, and it's like, if you're having that now, that's what we're just going to sort of nurture and cultivate as a thought process, which is that you're proud of your scar, and you're proud of this thing that you have that makes you different. And it's the difference, I suppose, is that having any sort of disability of any description or anything that makes you different from everyone is a wonderful thing and should be celebrated. Even the word disability, I have a problem with, you know.
Yeah, dis, isn't it? It's that dis part, which is
the dis part. It others in a negative. It has negative connotations. That you're somehow less than, and you're not. This is the opposite of that for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I totally agree. And I'd like to move on, if I may, to something we mentioned right at the very beginning. Yeah. And I didn't want to give away any spoilers. I've done half an hour's worth of suspense. I think that's enough for people. But we share, as well as having Hirschsprungs, and anybody who has listened to Jamie's episode will know this as well, that we, for many years, decade and a half, just over, had the same consultant, same Hirschsprung specialist, the wonderful Mr. Kiely, who saved both of our lives.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't thank the guy enough. You know, hopefully we'll get to speak to him again one day, which would be amazing. What were your experiences of Mr. Kiely?
Oh, I just can't. he's obviously outside of my family. He's the most important man in the world. Like, I wouldn't be here without him. He is a legend. I mean, he's a legend. When we were in hospital with Dylan, they said, you know, oh, you were in hospital, were you, Fred? Who were you? Who was your surgeon? I said, Mr. Kiely. It was like, I think Dylan already said this. It was like, you know, I said the name of a major celebrity, and my Dylan's surgeon was Mr. Copy was Mr. Kiely's protege. Like, again, this sort of circle of life thing was going on there as well. And I remember we had a little chat before we went on air about when I came to London to go to drama school after my time in Glasgow. I was on my laptop just doing something, and I heard his voice, this wonderful sort of Irish lilt, and looked up, and there he was. It was a documentary about Hope and Faith, the Siamese twins, and he obviously did that operation. And I was like, I need to go and see him. I need to go and see him. I need to go to Great Ormond Street and see him. And then, so I went to Russell Square, I went to Great Ormond Street, and I said, oh, sorry, can I just see Mr. Kiely, please? Like, obviously you can't, because he's the busiest man in the world saving children's lives. Why would he just want to... Who are you, by the way? That's like, I'm Fred, I'm Spike, he might remember me. I was here for 2 years. And long story short, 5 weeks later, got a 10-minute window and went in, and I just basically shook his hand and thanked him for saving my life. And obviously, he's the most humble man in the world. So obviously didn't want any of that. Didn't want any of that at all. It just turned into a consultation about my bowel movements. And I was like, okay, here we go. But he's just the most incredible man. There was a documentary, which I'm desperately trying to get hold of, and so is my brother, who's a pediatric consultant. Now, as a result of me being ill in hospital, he's now a pediatric consultant at Salisbury, Sebastian Gray, shouts out. And he's trying to get hold of it as well. There's a documentary in Great Ormond Street where Mr. Kiely and another surgeon, who I can't remember his name now, talk about what it is to do what they do. And it's just incredible because you see it from both sides. And there's different cases that they study, but you see Mr. Kiely talking about what it is to do what he does. And you also see that moment where he obviously, they show him doing the operations to a boy who has a tumor in his stomach, I believe, and then he removes it. And then that moment where he comes in and tells the parents that he's okay. And it's the juxtaposition of their, like, almost falling to their knees gratitude to him, and just like don't know what to do with themselves, that their young child is saved and better because of him, and him sort of just shrugging off as if he's just, you know, bought them a coffee. It's like, yeah. No. Yeah. You need to realize that you've saved us, you've saved our family, you've saved this person. I say to my brother and my sister-in-law, who's a GP as well, but and any doctors, I just don't know how they do it. I just don't know how. Obviously, it's just the pressure, the stakes. I'm an actor director man, and like just sort of mess around for a living. This is craziness. If I saved anyone's life ever, like, that's all I would talk about. I would always put it in conversations. I would phone people up and tell them. It would be a thing that I just couldn't shrug it off in the way that he does. But from my perspective, seeing that again was like imagining him. This is obviously before Dylan was born. Imagining him coming and telling my parents that I was better after an operation. And the fact that he did that hundreds, thousands of times in his life. I mean, what a life. And what a guy. How do you not develop an ego?
Oh, you know, I don't, no idea.
Why did you not have an ego? I just don't. And then during this consultation of meeting him and saying, thank you for saving my life, he then started recounting things that my parents didn't even remember. He said, did you ever end up moving to Australia? And I was like, what? And then I phoned my parents and said, what's this talk about us moving to Australia? And it jogged a memory for them. And there was a period of time when you were like 6 where we were potentially going to move to Australia. I was like, how does this man remember that? He called me Spike. Like, he remembered my name from hospital. He was like, do you want me to call you Spike or Frederick? And I go by Fred now. And he's like, okay, I'll call you Fred. I was like, oh my God, like, absolutely incredible. Like, absolutely. And I would love to meet him again. I would love to see him again. Obviously, you know, as I said, it takes it's 5 weeks to get hold of him last time.
Yes.
I'm prepared to wait. And if you can get him on the podcast, I would. Oh my goodness, that would be incredible. He's an incredible man, and I've got nothing negative to say about him.
Absolutely.
One of my mum's favourite stories about one of the times I went in to see him is actually a story about me rather than him. Very egotistical, Fred. Was he said to me, "What's your favourite time of the day when you go to school? What's your favourite time of the day?" And I was like, "Lunchtime," because I was always hungry, always hungry. It's very expensive in this house, very expensive, and it's going to be expensive. Like me and Dylan with Hirschsprungs. I mean, he's going to get, as a teenager, and it's going to be like, okay, we need to get another job. Like, Dylan needs to go to work, 13. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I pick up your point about not having an ego. And I mean, again, who knows how many lives he's saved? We're probably talking hundreds, thousands, of operations, of walking in to see parents and saying, "Yep, everything's fine," or "We've done this and we've done this, and whatever the issue was, we've sorted it, solved it." And I mean, as you said, you talk about it all the time, but he's such an elusive man. I mean, I would have, I'd have a LinkedIn page, I'd have everything saying, "I saved someone's life." It would be the first thing that my voicemail would say, "Hi, this is Tom. I saved someone's life. Anyway, what do you want?" It would be everything.
Yeah.
But he's such an elusive man, and he's done the odd sort of seminar here and there. But apart from that, there's no social media. And there are sort of social media posts about him, but he doesn't have social media as far as I know. It doesn't have, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that stuff. Just quietly.
I just think, again, I feel very, very, obviously very lucky to have had him as a surgeon and to be in Great Ormond Street. Since Dylan's diagnosis, we joined a Facebook group. Are you on that as well? It's like a Hirschsprung.
I'm on a couple. I think there's a Hirschsprung's Family and Friends, which has got about 10,000 on it, and then there's Hirschsprung's Group UK.
Right. You think I've got the friends one. And I am just very lucky because not everyone's been as lucky with the care they've received, and where they are in the world, and the particular condition that their child has. And it's a group that when Dylan was in hospital, I just had to stop looking at it because because obviously people don't, in the same way you go to a restaurant and you don't often post things that are good, do you?
Yeah.
People will see reviews that are bad, and it's similar with this group, is that people would only really post saying, "My son has this and my daughter has this," and it would all just be sort of emergencies about how bad the condition is, and it would just be sort of it would just make me scared about the fact that I've had this experience that has been by and large obviously traumatic for my parents, but my memories of it were mostly positive and fine. Like, it's 2 years is a long time, and obviously past that, obviously a lot of my time was spent in Great Ormond Street, but I don't. I've just been incredibly lucky to be here, to just sort of exist and live my life. And I'm turning 40 next year, which is amazing and stuff. And that it doesn't seem to. I just feel really grateful for that, because there are obviously stories that aren't as successful with people with Hirschsprungs, and I suppose things like this and that community. I mean, I'm not saying that this Facebook group shouldn't exist, by the way. I think it's fantastic that people are reaching out and people are offering help. And I've written a few posts offering hope, I suppose, saying, look, I went through all of this and I am fine, and hopefully I'm crossing my fingers that I just feel at that stage it feels so sort of futile to say those things, because you're like, well, you're in the depths of hell right now, and nothing I could say or anyone could say, because in terms of like practical advice, we were learning on the job as well. I didn't, when putting Dylan's stoma on and like putting Dylan Stower on, putting the bags on and things, like, was a whole new world to me. It wasn't like, oh, here we go again, because I didn't have a stoma that went past the age of 2, I don't think, you know. It was like, I remember my parents telling me a story that one of their worst memories of me in hospital was watching me with my stomach open, with a hole in the table. I had my hands tied, and the waste from my stomach was being dropped into a bucket.
Wow. That's a visual.
Which is a memory that I don't want to contest, like, but they, you know, this was a thing that they would say happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that could happen or why that happened. You know, I'm like, why did they tie me to a table? And why was there a hole in the table? Was it specifically designed, like, what, and why into a bucket? Like, everything about it. Like,
yeah, there's nothing about it that sounds normal.
Exactly. So in terms of moving forward, you know, we had some like the time in hospital with Dylan, there was some really horrible, like, there's nothing. I would take Dylan in for his operations. He had 5 in total, and there is nothing that prepares you for putting your child under anaesthetic, like, and watching the eyes roll back in their head and them going sort of floppy. Like, it's the worst. It's the worst thing, because you have to sort of bribe them. I remember we showed them these, like, dancing vegetables, and he was like all happy sort of dancing, and then they start doing the gas and air things, and then he goes from this happy thing to, like, just being floppy and sort of lifeless, and you're like, well, that's something I'll never forget, you know. But I didn't have a tied to the table. We didn't have that, so we've moved on. Let's say we've moved on.
Absolutely. And then just to sort of as we wrap up towards the end here, in terms of, I know I asked Jamie the same question. In terms of Dylan, would you like to see him go into the acting world?
I would like him to do, obviously, whatever he wants to do. He's got this weird thing where he loves to perform. He does this amazing bow, which is obviously picked up from seeing Jamie in shows. He's got this amazing bow that he does. But then he also just randomly gets really, really, really shy. Like, won't do anything in front of any, like, doesn't. But also has this, I don't know. So it's jury's out, really. He's very creative. He's very maybe eccentric. No eccentric. He's a character. He's got a lot of personality. He could go in any different direction. Like, he's going to do something. He's going to do something that involves people, for sure.
Right.
Very good with people, as I mentioned when I was sick a couple of months ago. His empathy is, for a 3-year-old, is quite extraordinary. So he might follow his uncle.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It has been a pleasure to meet you and to meet somebody else who's seen Mr. Kiely and all of the things that we've had or have in common. It's just been extraordinary. And just lastly, where can people find you?
People can find me. Well, this is the thing. I'm not really a social media, and I should be. In question, I should be better at it. But I'm on Twitter at FreddyG1304. That's Freddy with a Y. And then I'm literally having to look as we're live on the thing to see what my Instagram handle is, because it's a thing that I don't use at all. What is it? Let's have a look. I can't even find. Is it Fred? Oh yeah, there we go. Fred_Gray with an A, 1313. It's Fred_Gray. It's 13, and I'm on Instagram there. So that's where you can find me, but you won't really find me there because I'm not. I don't use it. I probably need to get on it more. I just have this thing of like, well, I don't. That's not interesting, you know. But like,
yeah.
Like I don't. No one cares what I think about that thing, or like, just like, okay, I'll just keep. Yeah. So that's where you can find me. That's what I do. If you.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I wish all three of you, JB, yourself, and Dylan, all the best for the future.
You know, and if the podcast is running in, I'd say, 10 years, get Dylan on. You know,
I'll let you know in 10 years' time. I'll be long retired by then.
Get the 3 done, and then you can, you know, you've got me, Jamie, and Dylan all talking about it. It's fantastic. And you know, in terms of suspense, nailed it. 10 years of suspense. People will be waiting for Dylan to come on.
Exactly.
Right now, we're just not that good at, you know, like You could try. You get them on for next week.
We'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Tom.